Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to be introducing today's guest, Mary Lou Williams. Mary Lou Williams is a professional storyteller and writer, and she's a retired educator who has spent 35 years as a high school teacher of English and also of mathematics. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Queens College and a Master of Education from Columbia University. She's been a member of the Fort Myers Toastmasters since 2001, where she has earned the Advanced Toastmasters Silver Award, specializing in storytelling and entertaining speaker categories. So she has also been a member of the Florida Speakers Association and was Member of the Year, and she's a member of the Tamiami Tale Tellers of Fort Myers and the Gulf Coast Writers Association. And many people have heard her tell stories or been in her seminars and webinars related to fractured fairy tales. So welcome, Mary Lou.
Thank you, Tamara.
I'm really interested in understanding a little bit more, what exactly is a fractured fairy tale?
Well, a fractured fairy tale, according to the Oxford Companion to Fairy Tales, there is such a tome, is a classic tale like Cinderella or Snow White that keeps the basic plot and characters of the original story, but changes it in unexpected ways, giving it a modern perspective and ironic twists. And there are examples of it in modern media that people are familiar with, even if they're not aware that they're fractured fairy tales. For example, Wicked is a fractured version of The Wizard of Oz. And West Side Story is a fractured version of Romeo and Juliet. And let me see what other ones. My Fair Lady, a fractured version of the Greek myth Pygmalion. So these are all examples of fractured fairy tales that are very prevalent and very, very much in vogue in modern media.
So you've actually written many books, but you have some books related. I think one of your books features 10 fractured fairy tales. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I fractured some fairy tales because I tell for adults, but I also tell for children. Mostly I tell for adults. And in telling to adults, I can't tell them a fairy tale that I would tell to a child. And I thought to make it relevant to adults and make it relevant to the modern age, I would bring in modern references and anachronisms that would make it humorous and also make it more pertinent and more understandable to a modern audience, and give it a different perspective from the perspective that they originally had as medieval tales. Because the fairy tales they weren't written actually, they were handed down from generation to generation, but they go back centuries even, and they have the perspective of the time in which they were written, which is not the perspective of the modern world. But they have universal truths that are still speak to us across the centuries. So I wanted to keep them, but also make it relevant and give it the perspective of that a modern audience would relate to. So to do that, I didn't even know there was such a thing as fractured fairy tales when I did it. After I did do it, I found out that they existed beyond what I originally came up with. So that's how I came to know about these. I became aware of fractured fairy tales after I started writing them myself. Another example is Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which is a fractured version of the Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors. So it pervades our modern world too, even though people might not be aware of fractured fairy tales, but that's what they're looking at and hearing. So I decided I was going to tell fairy tales to adults, but I was going to make them relevant to adults in the modern world. And so I came up with ways to modernize certain of the classic fairy tales, the ones that people are most familiar with. So, for example, I took the story of Cinderella. I think that's the one that most people are familiar. It's the most familiar of all the fairy tales, and I called it the story of Ugly Cindy, and made her ugly and her stepsisters beautiful, and I switched it around in that way. And I also made it. Instead of her marrying the prince, I have her marry the dance instructor who teaches her how to dance before the ball. So I changed it in a lot of ways. And other examples of my fractured fairy tales in this book of 10 fractured fairy tales is the Princess and the Pea that felt like a bowling ball. That's a fractured version of the Hans Christian Andersen story. The Rumpelstiltskin rap. I put a rap into the story of Rumpelstiltskin and make it modern in that way. And Hansel and Gretel and the Witch Who Was on a High-Protein Diet. That's another fractured fairy tale. And Snow White and the Seven Vertically Challenged Persons. They're all titles that give the flavor of the fracturing of the tale.
All of those make me chuckle, because like the rap, and again, that just is kind of like, because most of us know all of these fairy tales from, because they were told to us as we were children or read to us. And so just the idea when you threw out, Ugly Cindy and the stepsisters being beautiful, or the Rumpelstiltskin rap, or the vertically challenged people, I mean, it makes it funny. So yes. Tell me a little bit more about where you put on your programs. Do you, I know that you're here on the Gulf Coast of Florida. What's going on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and do you go other places, and do you work with people online? I'm curious to know more about that.
Well, I tell at various places. I give seminars and performances at the Renaissance Academy in Punta Gorda. I also do the same thing at Fort Myers Beach Library. And I also tell at with a group of people. We call ourselves the Storytellers of the Round Table. There are 4 of us, and from October to May, the season down here, we perform once a month at Naples, in a Naples tea room called Bramble's English Tea Room, and we put on a performance called Tea and Tales, and from 6 to 8 p.m. From 6 to 7, there's the tea, and from 7 to 8, there's the tales, and that's the 4 of us telling our stories. And we tell stories that usually reflect whose themes reflect the holiday of the month in which we tell them. So, for example, in October, we tell ghost stories. In November, we tell stories about of gratitude. December, we tell holiday stories. February, we tell love stories. March, we often tell St. Patrick's Day stories, Irish stories. And April, we tell April Fool's stories, tall tales. And in May, we tell Mother's Day stories about mothers. So we do that. We've been doing that. This is the 5th year we've done it, and we sell out most of the time, and we've become an established event at Bramble's English Tea Room in Naples. And we also put on storytelling showcases at the Sugden Theater in Naples once a year. We have 10 storytellers. We gather storytellers from all the people we know and the various organizations we're in. There's the Tamiami Tale Tellers is a storytelling guild in Fort Myers that's been in existence for about 30 years. We draw on storytellers from there. And storytellers from Toastmasters, which the 4 of us belong to, because there's many talented storytellers in Toastmasters. That's an aspect of public speaking, storytelling. And so we put on a show. Well, we also draw from the Florida Storytelling Association, which is the main storyteller organization, the state storytelling organization, and in Florida. And we draw on talent from there as well. And we put on a showcase every year. This is the 4th year we'll be doing it. What is it, the 5th? I can't remember now. It's at least the 4th, maybe the 4th. I think it is the 4th. We're putting on the 4th storytelling showcase this April at the Sugden Theater on 5th Avenue in Naples. And we'll be 10 tellers telling our stories, and we've been doing that very successfully for the last 4 years. And we also put the same show on the following year at the Alliance for the Arts in Fort Myers. So I'm busy telling it a lot of places.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I know that coming up in December that you're doing something with the book broker, James Abraham in Punta Gorda. Can you tell me a little bit more about that event?
Yes, that event, I believe it's on December 5th. And it's in Punta Gorda at the Herald Court, or I think it's Herald Street or Court, something like that, where the Renaissance Academy is located in Punta Gorda. And there's going to be a book fair there that James Abraham is putting on, and there'll be quite a number of authors who will be presenting their books and topics and a presentation about their books, related to their books. And I'll be giving a presentation on fractured fairy tales where I'll actually tell a fractured fairy tale. And I'll tell I'll tell more than just one. I'll put on fractured fairy tale performance. And I'll also tell about my book and have it there for people to look at if they're interested in seeing it. So in a storyteller, there's two aspects of storytelling: the story and the telling, and both are equally important in storytelling. So it's not just that I've written these stories, but also that I perform them. And when I give the presentation at the book fair, I'll be telling my stories so that people will get a flavor of what it's like to hear them as well as read them.
That's really super. So would you be willing to tell me a fractured fairy tale or part of a fractured fairy tale so our audience can get an idea of the stories that you tell?
Sure. I have one called Hermit the Frog Prince, and it's a fractured fairy tale based on the Frog Prince, the Grimm's Brothers Frog Prince story. And it starts off, once upon a time there was a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was the most beautiful of them all, and her name was Charlotte. And one day Princess Charlotte was playing in the garden of the castle and throwing her golden ball up in the air and catching it as it came down again. And even though she was now quite the grown-up young lady, she still loved throwing her golden ball up in the air and catching it when it came down again. But one time she threw it up and she missed catching it when it came down, and it fell in the well where she couldn't reach it, and she started to cry. Boo hoo hoo, boo hoo hoo, I've lost my ball, my golden ball. All of a sudden she heard a voice call out, Princess, why are you crying? And she looked to see an ugly toad raise his head up out of the water, and she said, oh, I've lost my golden ball and I can't get it. I can get it for you. What will you give me if I do? I have nothing. Oh, I will give you my crown, my jewels, even my golden, even my gown, my jewels, even my golden crown. I do not want your gown, your jewels, your golden crown, but if you will promise to cherish me and let me be your companion and eat at your table and sleep in your silken bed, ambitious frog, I will dive down and get your golden ball. Well, Princess Charlotte looked at that ugly head and that green skin and that slimy coat, and she repelled. Oh, she was just recoiled at the sight of such a thing. But she really wanted her golden ball, so she said, sure, dear frog, anything you want, you've got it. Well, once he had her word, he dove down into the well and brought her back her golden ball. He dropped it on the ground. She picked it up and ran home as fast as her royal legs would carry her, and slammed the door behind her and forgot all about the poor frog and the promises she made to him. Well, one night, that night at dinner, while they were having the king and his court were eating dinner, they heard something come up the marble staircase. Clop, plop, 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 hop, hop, and knock at the castle door. Princess, youngest princess, let me in. Who was that? Asked the king. So Princess Charlotte had to tell her father what had happened. Go and let him in. Once you make a promise, you must keep it. So she let the frog in. He followed her up to her chair. Once he got to her chair, he wanted to get on that table. And once he was on the table, he hopped over to her golden plate. He hopped right into her golden plate and landed in the mashed potatoes. Then he waddled in the gravy, nestled in the vegetables, and chomped down on the meat with his mouth open. Why aren't you eating? The king asked his daughter. I've lost my appetite, said she. And then the king, then what happened then? Then the dessert was served, and the frog jumped into it, swallowed everything, including topped it off with the cherry on top, at which point he belched. At which point Charlotte fainted. She woke up to see the frog hop from the table, or rather plop from the table onto the chair because he was too full to hop, and then plop from the chair onto the ground. He waddled across the room and hopped up onto the couch with a beer in one hand and a remote in the other, and he started channel surfing until he came across a football game between the Miami Dolphins and the Georgia Bullfrogs. The Georgia Bullfrogs were his favorite team, of course. And then he fell asleep and started snoring, just as if he had been married for 20 years. Princess Charlotte took this opportunity to tiptoe ever so quickly up the stairs. The frog opened one eye and said, Hey, don't forget your promise. Not tonight, said Princess Charlotte. I have a headache. Whereupon her father became angry. When you make a promise, you have to keep it. And so, this being a fairy tale, and this being the age when children obey their parents, Princess Charlotte did what she was told. She hopped up the stairs, she tiptoed up the stairs with the frog in one hand and went into her room. She threw him against the wall. Sorry, she didn't throw him against the wall. And then she went to bed. She put him in a corner. Well, she was just about to go to sleep when the frog said, Princess, don't forget your promise. But we've hardly met, said the princess. What kind of a princess do you think I am? A very beautiful princess, said the frog, and one that has the power to break the spell that was cast upon me. What spell? She said. Spell that the wicked witch cast upon me. And then it goes on from there.
Wow, I want to know that. I love that. So that is one of the stories in your book about the 10 fractured fairy tales, right?
Right.
So how can people get a copy of that book? Since now I want to know.
What happens next? Well, they can go on my website, which is www.story-theater, spelled with an R-E at the end, .com. They can order it from there, and they can order it on Amazon.
Oh, okay, perfect. So you can go to story-theater, and theater is spelled T-H-E, and now my brain just...
A-T-R-E.
THEATRE.com, story-theater.com. And you had me, I'm listening, and I'm like, okay, what happens? And what's the spell? And is he going to, and since it's fractured, is he going to be a prince? What's this frog going to end up being? Because it's a fractured fairy tale, so you don't know.
Right, that's right.
It's not going to be what you think it is. So, wow,
it doesn't end the way it does in the Grimm's fairy tales.
Yeah, so that's a really great example, and I think everybody should go check out that and get that book, 10 Fractured Fairy Tales by Mary Lou Williams. And again, tell us again, how can they get more information? They can go to your website, of course. Is there any other places where they can look for you?
I'm trying to think. Well, they can. I think that's about it. That's it on the internet, and then they can go to Amazon, as I said. They can get the book on Amazon, And they also can get another book I wrote for children. Actually, I didn't write it. I illustrated it. Another author wrote it. They can get that on my website as well, Silly Sally.
Okay.
And, mm-hmm.
Great. And everyone, if you are in Southwest Florida, December 5th, go to check out Harold Court and James Abraham, the Book Brokers event, where Mary Lou Williams, storyteller, will be speaking. And of course, Mary Lou, check out all of the places where Mary Lou tells stories at story-theater.com, because it's like I said, I definitely was intrigued. I want to know how that story ends. And I'm sure if you ever get a chance to go to watch Mary Lou Williams perform, it's a whole nother adventure in storytelling. It reminds me of when I was a little kid. My mom used to have us in the morning before we went to school. She would have us sit around and she would tell us stories before we went off to school. And then, of course, during nap time, if you remember elementary school, many of us had nap time or rest time. And the teacher would either tell stories or read to us as we were lying there quietly. So it brings back a lot of memories for me, because storytelling and reading and listening were a really big part of my childhood. And that's something that everyone should try to bring back, is the oral tradition of storytelling.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.